You've apologized for things that weren't your fault. You softened your opinions before you even finished the sentence. You've watched someone go quiet the second you walked into a room and assumed you did something wrong. Here's the thing nobody tells you. You didn't do anything wrong. You're just intimidating people without realizing it. And by the end of this, you're going to understand exactly why and stop apologizing for it. Picture this, you're in a meeting and you ask one direct question, not rude, not loaded, just clear. And the room shifts. Someone laughs nervously. Someone else suddenly finds their notebook fascinating. You replay the moment later that night, wondering what you did wrong. Nothing. That's the part that's hard to accept. You didn't raise your voice, you didn't make a face, you just existed in a way that felt, to someone else, like too much. Maybe it's happened at a party too. You walk over to say hi, and the conversation that was loose and easy a second ago suddenly gets careful, almost rehearsed. You leave wondering if you smell weird or said something off. You didn't. That gap, between what you intended and what they felt, is where this whole video lives. So let's talk about what's actually happening, starting with eye contact. Psychologists studying gaze behavior have found that a steady, direct gaze triggers real physiological stress responses in people who are lower in social status or confidence. It activates something close to a fight or flight reaction. Most people glance away every few seconds out of habit, almost like a social tic, a tiny release valve that signals, "I'm not a threat." If you don't do that, if your eyes just stay where the conversation is, it's not because you're trying to dominate anyone, it's because you're actually listening. But here's where it gets interesting. The brain reads sustained attention as a power signal, whether or not you meant it that way. This is why you've probably been told you have intense eyes by people who meant it as a compliment and a warning in the same breath. Then there's your voice. Research on vocal pitch and perceived dominance has found that lower-pitched, steadier voices are read across cultures as signals of authority and leadership capacity. People even unconsciously shift their own pitch up or down depending on who they think outranks them. It's an instinct, not a choice. So if your voice doesn't rise into that nervous question mark cadence, if you state things instead of asking them, people register status before they register your actual words. This is why you can say something completely neutral, like, "I think we should go with option B," and someone hears a verdict instead of a suggestion. You weren't trying to close the conversation. You just didn't leave the door open the way they're used to. There's also something simpler at play: silence. Most people fill dead air automatically because silence feels like a gap that needs patching. If you're comfortable letting a pause sit there, not awkward, just unfilled, that comfort reads as control to people who experience silence as pressure. Psychologists call this discomfort with stillness, and it explains why a single unhurried pause from you can feel, to someone else, like you're waiting for them to fail. And then there's the confidence piece, which is really about something psychologists call self-efficacy. Albert Bandura's term for how much you trust your own ability to handle what comes at you. People with high self-efficacy tend to look settled, even in uncertainty. Their shoulders don't apologize, their voice doesn't ask permission. Now, before the comment section explodes, that's not arrogance, that's just regulation. But to someone who's still figuring out their own footing, your calm doesn't look like calm. It looks like a mirror, and nobody enjoys a mirror that shows them their own self-doubt. Now here's the layer that's harder to sit with. Sometimes this isn't confidence at all. Sometimes the same stillness, the same flat directness, the same refusal to perform emotion comes from somewhere heavier. There's a version of this that's secure and grounded, built on actually feeling safe in your own skin. And there's a version that's a nervous system that learned a long time ago that softness wasn't safe, so it built a wall instead of a foundation. Armor that looks like strength from the outside but feels like isolation from the inside. Both can look identical to a stranger. Both get called intimidating. Only one of them feels like peace when you're alone with it. It's worth being honest with yourself about which one you're actually living in, because the fix for each one is completely different. But if it's the first kind, if underneath it you actually feel okay, then here's the reframe. You're not cold. You're not too much. You're not unapproachable. You're someone who stopped performing comfort for other people's benefit. You're not intimidating. You're undiluted. The discomfort other people feel around you usually isn't about anything you did. It's projective identification, a concept psychologists use to describe what happens when someone's anxiety gets pinned onto the calm person in the room instead of being recognized as their own. You didn't cause that feeling. You just didn't absorb it the way they expected you to, and that refusal, quiet as it is doing more work than you realize. Maybe the real story isn't that you intimidate people. Maybe it's that most people have never stood next to someone who wasn't performing, and they didn't know what to call that, so they called it intimidating instead. You were never too much. You were just early to something other people haven't found yet, the version of themselves that doesn't need an audience to feel real. If this hit home, hit subscribe. This channel is basically a mirror for people who think too much about why people act the way they do. And if this resonated, you'll probably love our video on why emotionally intelligent people seem distant. Click that one next, because it's the other half of this story.